stool the height where you're leaning over, you're not like down into this, but you don't want to be way up above because it takes away all of your strength. So I keep mine all the way at the bottom because I'm tall. If you're a little shorter, you may need it a little higher. And y'all have noticed that these adjust, right? Yes. I don't think I mentioned that to anybody this year. Okay, so you want to make it into a ball. So you're going to video?
It's going.
Oh, you are? You've been videoing all the time. All right. So just like you did for a pinch pot and any time else, you're flattening out your corners. The closer it is to a real sphere when you put it on here, the easier it is on you later. People that have done this a lot and are good at it may not bother because they're so good at doing this part, but you want to give yourself every advantage. And the reason it's called throwing on the wheel is originally on these, they had a rope with a rock on the end. And like a top, like a kid's toy, they would throw the rock and it would pull the rope and make it spin. We thankfully have electricity, but we still call it throwing. And some people think about it because they're throwing this down. The problem if you throw it down on here is it's real easy to throw it where it's not centered. So I usually set it on, but I give it a good pounding on all sides because what you don't want to happen, especially you guys right here, is for it not to stick because it will literally fly. Okay. I've actually done that to a kid before. All right, so there's a pedal over here that makes it go faster and slower. Always make sure it's off before you turn it on. And it changes, it can go real fast. It's like an accelerator on your car. It's a rheostat, like a dimmer switch, so you can give more or less juice to it. Centering, you want it to go fast. We use water to get rid of friction because if I try to do it now, it's going to stick to my hands and it's not going to stay on there. So we use a sponge and you squeeze some water, and this is a splash pan, and the theory is that it all stays inside here. You wear an apron and you assume you're also going to be a mess, all of your body, just assume it, especially when you're beginning. Okay. I don't center like anybody else because I've had 2 hand surgeries. I have deformed, weird hands. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and I'm going to tell you theory, but you have to figure out what works for you. How tall are you? How strong are you? How big are your hands? Are you left-handed? Are you right-handed? What feels right to you? All those things matter. I suggest if you're going to go on the wheel that you go on YouTube and you watch a whole bunch of different people doing this, and then you can try. But the theory is the same regardless. So get your hands wet first, and you get this wet. You're going to, it's called coning. We're going to bring it up into a cone, and then we push it back down. And when we push it down, we're going to keep left or right-handed. You're stuck, and y'all are looking opposite, so it's going to look different to you when you're doing it. But your left hand, it's turning into my left hand. I'm going to try to control where it goes with this hand. So this hand, I'm going to be putting quite a bit of pressure down on the wheel and trying to keep it still. This hand is going to move the clay up and down. There's going to be a point where I have no strength and can't do that because of my surgeries. So I'm going to come over here and put my fist on it to push it down. And I have to, you don't want your elbows out because then you're all here. This is physics. They got to be in here against your body. Now I've heard people say, don't get yourself so tense, you'll never get it to work. Okay, well, once you know what you're doing, that's probably the case. But it takes time to feel what the clay is doing. Your object is, can you see that it's not even everywhere? Mm-hmm. When it's centered, it won't look like it's moving. That means it's all actually in the middle. So I'm going to bring it up and cone it up. You got to be careful not to make a big dip in the top because that causes air bubbles. So that's coned. And as I push it back down, I'm pushing it into this cavity that I'm creating with mine. Now, my cavity's weird because I've got my thumb joint sticking out because I had that surgery. So I'm going to cone up and push down. As long, the clay is not going to get centered by you just going, ugh, unless you're my wrestler husband who sat down, did it once and never touched it again. Could have shot him. Yeah. Unless you're exceedingly strong, that's not going to help you. It's technique. So I'm bringing it up from the bottom, coning it up, and then often I use my fist. I'm not on the opposite side, I go on the same side as my other hand. So I'm lifting it up and down. It's going to move to center because it's moving up and down. It's not, and I don't really need to do it that many times, I'm just showing you. Most videos will show someone center it in about 3 seconds and they make it look easy. And then when you try it yourself, you get all frustrated, and they're experienced, so they're not really showing you what they're doing. Okay, it's not quite centered. See how my hand's still moving? I've got to get some of this clay at the bottom to also be centered. I'm getting closer. It starts to dry and I'm sticking to it. That's when you add water. I also use the sponge and I clean the base. If you let this get all full of clay and rutted, your hand will get caught in it and you won't ever get it centered. Okay, I'm definitely out of practice. When you take your hands off, you got to make sure you take them off evenly, or you can uncenter it right after you centered it. It's almost there. See how my hand's not moving much? So close. It's actually harder to get it centered when it's almost centered than when it's way off. I often just don't look and I go by the feel. Because if you look at it, it does these concentric circle spiral things. That feels centered. Clean it off so you can actually tell. Yeah, that's centered. So now I need to open it. There's several ways. Some people take 2 thumbs and push down and make the original hole. Some people take 1 thumb. I can't, that's what I used to do. I have no control over my thumbs anymore. They're not attached to anything. So that's not an option. I've said some people that they'll hold here and they'll use their middle finger. I don't really have control over any of my hands anymore, so I have to do a combination of things to make it work. Again, I would watch videos. I usually use 2 because I can press them against each other. And I get just a divot started so I know it's truly in the middle. Add a little water, and if I use my finger, I support it with my hand, and you can see I actually peeled some off. That's not supposed to happen. So when you open it, you want to leave about 3/4 of an inch of clay at the bottom. If you go all the way down to the base, you just put a hole in the bottom. Okay. Once you've got that original opening, you're going to slow it way down. Centrifugal force will make it where you can't keep control. You don't want it so slow that you get caught in it like a slug. So kind of a low medium speed. So we're going to do what's called the first pull. And it depends what shape you're making. No matter what shape you're making, you want to start with a cylinder. It may be a wide cylinder, it may be a tall cylinder, but you want a straight up and down cylinder, and then you create the shape out of it. That makes it strong. I'm going to make this one a little wider, so I'm going to pull outward. And that gives me a wider opening. If I were making a little tall rose vase, I would not want to put it out that far. I'm adding water and then I soak it away. You don't want to leave water sitting in the center. It will eat through the clay and disintegrate it completely. Okay, this part, you're taking your left hand over your right hand. It makes your right middle finger lower than your left one. you're gonna squeeze, you're only using these 2 fingers. Elbows in. I'm gonna make a little ridge inside and outside. I made a button that I don't want to be there. I'm gonna get rid of that. Kaylee, can you bring your phone over here a second? You can see inside I've made a little ridge that's dipped in. So I have that same ridge inside and outside. This is called raising. I'm not gonna squeeze any more than what I already did, but I'm gonna come upward. I put more pressure on the outside hand than the inside hand. And as I come up, I put less and less and less because I don't want to thin it out. And it raised up. And that happens because I'm squeezing the clay in between my fingers, those 2 middle fingers of the 2 different hands, and it forces the clay upward. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make myself a little indention. So that same indention's on the inside that's on the outside. If you put the water, you can hold your sponge still and put it on the rim, and it coats both inside and outside. And you're gonna keep doing that. Like I said, my strength is having issues, so I'm not using the tip of my finger, I'm using my knuckle instead. So you can figure out what works. If you have fingernails, you might need to use your knuckles instead because you'll gouge. I've had this actually take my fake fingernail right off. So you have to be careful. You can push down on the bottom with your sponge if it starts to get what they literally call a nipple in there, and push it down because you don't want that. Looks like a little button. Okay, it's starting to go out more than I want it to. I'm getting both my hands wet. This is called necking in. I'm starting at the bottom. You don't do it a whole lot. I'm just doing a little bit, putting pressure, and it's going to make it smaller. Called necking in. For those of you that have had me help you with your coils and they went outward when we want them to go up, and I roll it on the table, that's the same process in extreme slow motion. Okay, so going back inside, I'm going to gather some clay from the bottom. The mistake I usually make is I make the walls too thin. I'm not using a whole lot of clay, so this isn't going to be a big piece. It's probably as thin as I want to get. Easing up my pressure. See how my hands are locked. You can also do something. You take your thumb and your forefinger and take your opposite hand finger on top and make a square. I'm gonna hold, make sure your hands are wet. I'm gonna hold this, it slips through, and then I touch this down and I can make a nice top. Oh, I know what I forgot. I forgot my needle tool. Emily, yes. Look in the right drawer in my desk, the far right drawer if you were me looking outward. Okay. And in the top tray, there's some needle tools. They're handles with very sharp needles on them.
Is it the right handles?
Far right drawer, the little skinny drawer on the right. Yeah, that one should be in the top tray on the left. Should just be a bunch of tools that have needle. Yeah, there you go, perfect. Okay, I'm gonna change the shape a little bit. I want it to go outward, so I'm gonna push out from the inside. Notice I'm going very slowly. If you go up fast, you'll tear it apart. Those little lines are called finger marks. So if this were to get uneven, I would trim it with the needle tool, which I will do it regardless, so I can show you. If you're doing it all evenly and it's actually centered, you won't need to do that. Okay, the outside shape right now is about here. The inside shape is here, which means I need to take clay from the inside and add it up onto the side. Because you want even walls, just like with hand-built. If your walls are not even, that's what causes cracking. If I want it to go back in, I'm gonna have my outside hand go up above my inside one. And now I'm bringing it up. So there's that classic Greek shape. If it starts to feel a little wobbly and I want to condense it and make it better, I'm going to use the rib instead of my hand on the outside. It's gonna kind of squeegee it. It's gonna get rid of some of those finger marks and it's gonna make it stronger. Not everybody uses one. It's personal choice. I hope I haven't made this too thin. That's not feeling happy up here. I may lose the top. You can't just stop halfway though. Do you see this wobble? That wobble's not a happy thing. Let me see if I can get my wobble under control.
Happy trees.
This is what happens when I get the clay too thin. Calm down. Oh, do you see it collapsing? It's going to collapse. I don't know if I'm going to keep this one or not. Let's see if I can get it back under control. I made it way too thin. I can just tell you right now. Okay. To trim it, I don't want to do that on the top because I will destroy this if I try to put any pressure on it. But if you're going to, you get it wet, you hold it on, you have it, your hand wet on the inside, and you push the needle in until it touches your finger. And then once it goes one revolution, you lift up and it'll take the whole little top off. I'm not going to do that on this demo because I'm not messing with this. Okay, I need to get rid of this garbage at the bottom. I'm going to keep this tool at the angle that I want it to be. I'm going to put pressure heavily on the bat, and I'm going to slowly come in and trim off this bottom part. You got to make sure you have hold of this or you will just gouge and destroy this. So I'm going to come in a spiral, and that's an initial trimming that I just did there. I go ahead and scrape that away because then it will dry more evenly. You can see how wet this clay is. You don't have clay this wet for hand building ever. And then you're going to take your wire, make sure your thumbs are on top of the wire, and you run it underneath. You don't want it to go up or you'll slice it in half. You don't take it off until the next day, or if you're working and you actually are in the room like about 4 or 5 hours. So if I'm going to leave it overnight, I do float a bubble of plastic over it. I fill it with air so it's not touching it, so I can wait and do it the next day. And I can lift off this bat. Can't believe I say that, but I don't know if you can tell, it's still not even.
Yeah,
part of it's collapsing and part of it's not.
Oh no, I see.
Yeah, so I will probably ditch this, but anyway, that's the basics of throwing. I'm gonna do a bigger piece here in a minute and see if I can handle it. Once you learn how to center, the rest of it is just practicing. Centering can take a long time. It can take hours before you learn how to center. So just, you have to be prepared for that, okay? And that's it.